Okay, so I've inserted the hexagonal standoffs into the 3D printed parts, just because they were here and I didn't want to lose them. This comes much later, but anyway, here they are. I'll put them aside. This one's kind of tight, so good tip from Hugh is you heat up the standoff and maybe even the 3D printed part, but especially the standoff. You take a hair dryer, heat it up nice and hot, and then put it in there. It'll just slide right in, so it's good. Otherwise, it's a pretty tight fit. Okay, so there we go, and let's take this apart. So the rear basically slides right out, and you can see the slots. I'll let you wonder why that's that way, but it's a pretty obvious reason if you think about it. So it has to be like this, and you can see these are the side retaining plates. These are 2mm, and this is really, it has to be a pretty snug fit. I mean, it has to be able to get on there, but you don't want too much play. There's the rear arm. The white marks are from just me rubbing the carbon on, so if you're into keeping your carbon pretty, again, this frame is not for you. Okay, let's take this one apart. Again, this is what you want. It's snug. Oh, that's really snug. Okay, there we go. I had to put it against my chest. That's it. Kind of a lot of pieces when you think about it, but once it's assembled, every piece makes sense. Front arm, rear arm, the two side plates, the two center plates, one for your battery strap, and then one for your flight controller on one side, and then the power PDB on the other side. Now here's where I had to sand it. I did not touch these, except out of the 4 plates I got, one of them had a little bit of a uneven. It's almost like there was a taper to it right here where this arm slides in, and so it would just stop. And so I had to just file that just a little bit. Oh, by the way, carbon will pretty much destroy any steel files. Diamond files are better, but I think you may still wear those down. So get some cheap files, cheap steel files, get a bunch, or go to Harbor Freight and get some diamond files. And when you're filing, what I do is I do it at my laundry sink with a very low trickle of water, and I wear gloves. And you can wear a face mask. It's recommended. I don't wear a face mask because every few seconds, literally few seconds, I'm dunking this back under the water. So I keep all the carbon wet, and all the dust just goes down the drain, so I don't have to worry about breathing it in. But I do wear gloves because that stuff will get all over your skin. And even when I first get the frame, I'll take a paper towel, wet it down, and wipe all the edges because from the factory it's got a lot of dust on it. So let's start. So other than that one plate out of 4 where I had to widen that just a hair, I didn't have to touch these, so we'll put that aside. And again, 2 of the arms were one thickness, and 2 of the arms that I got out of the 2 kits were another thickness, so I had to deal with that. The first thing I did was, if you'll notice this, when this hole is cut, it's cut by a bit that I believe is round. I don't know anything about CNC, but I'm pretty sure it's round. Now it's very small, but as it gets to the corners, you don't get true corners. It's got a slight roundness to it. This arm has to go in that hole. The arm has a true corner. So the first thing is that I did was I took a file and I filed this arm just a little bit. The thickest parts of the arm that this has to slide over, I filed it just a little round. So 45-degree angle, maybe 6, not very hard either, 6 to 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, back and forth. Obviously the whole thing, I didn't just do it one spot. The file was like this wide, so it got the whole thing. Same here, here, and here, because this is the same width. Actually, this is a little bit wider than here. I made this about 1/10 or total of 2/10 thinner than this thickness, so that this could slide over, because this is where it's important. This is where it has to clamp. So I filed a little bit around here, a little bit around here, and then for some reason they cut this conservative. In other words, this is a little bit thicker than it's supposed to be in my spec. So I did have to bring this down maybe 3 times, you know. And again, when you're doing this, don't do it all at once. Do it a few, fit it, do it a few more times, fit it. You have to keep trying it. And I did have to, like I said, these arms were 2 different thicknesses. I did have to widen this a little bit. I got some really small, narrow files, and I had to widen this. I just filed like back and forth a little bit on here, and I even had to lengthen this about 1/10, I would estimate, because, you know, I spec'd this to be narrower than this hole, and yet it just wouldn't fit. So finally, it, you know, a little bit of filing. But like I said, you know, you can take it off. You can't put it back, right? So if you underspec it or your tolerances are too big, you're gonna have a loose frame that rattles. So it's important that this filing be done, because it's important that this frame comes with pieces that are very tight to fit. So I did 4 of those, and I actually specifically did 2 for the front and 2 for the rear. Although in the end it probably doesn't matter. They should be interchangeable. But like I said, if you get 2 arms cut from 2 different plates that are slightly different thicknesses, you may want to do them specifically for the front and rear, and then you know, mark them or put them in a separate pile so you know which is which. So yeah, so if that wasn't clear, 2 for each arm, and these are the retaining plates that hold the side plates and compresses against these tabs, front and rear. Okay, so I filed there. I filed these. What else? Oh, these are very tight. I had these first spec'd a little bit loose, and when you're assembling, they wouldn't stay in the frame. They just keep falling out, and that makes assembling kind of difficult. So I made them like maybe a hair bigger, but now it's tight, and I had to file just a little. Actually, just a little here. You can see there's a slight taper to it. So it's a little here, but more importantly, again, the hole here is round at the ends. Okay, even though you can barely see it, it is. This one, so I filed this way and a little bit this way, like a 45-degree angle, and also here, just rounded this a little, because, you know, this is square and the other's not. Square peg, round hole, right? So once I rounded it, and I tapered this just a little bit, now it fits and stays. It makes it easy to assemble, so it's nice and snug. And then once you put it together and actually start screwing the screws in, the compression will squeeze everything. So you may have little gaps. Little gaps are okay so long as they get squeezed, and if they don't, you may have to readjust, but it's better to have it being squeezed than have it too loose. So these center plates, you know, if you have them a little too loose, that's okay. These aren't structurally important. These are just for holding the components. I mean, obviously you don't want your flight controller to rattle, but you know, as far as the strength of the frame, these won't have anything to do with it. So if it does rattle, maybe stick a little glue. But like I said, if you file a little bit at a time, you should not have that problem. Okay. So that's where I had to file. And another important note about filing these arms, because it's easy to do too much. I've made that mistake. This may not be, I had this hole, this slot here, it wasn't quite even, so some of it was narrower. So one way to find out is you stick this arm in here just a little bit, if I could, and you just slide it. So if it gets stuck anywhere, right, you know this slot is uneven. But since it's sliding back and forth evenly, obviously I filed it, then, you know, it's even. But if it's tight in one end, as you slide it in, it'll just get stuck. And be careful, because if you try to jam it in, you may either have a hard time getting it off, or you may even break it trying to remove it. But so do this test first. And if it does get stuck, file the slot wider where it's getting stuck. And again, I had to lengthen it just by 1/10 of a millimeter using a small file that happened to have a file on the edge of the file. So I did that again like 5 times, maybe, a little at a time. So same thing with the front. I rounded this. Same here. I rounded this a little bit. The widest parts of where that plate has to slide through, you want to round a little bit at an angle, 45-degree angle. Okay, so that's what I did to file it, and let's go ahead and assemble this frame. Just a test assembler with actual hardware. The hardware from Arbanin comes with steel screws and they're black standoffs. I am going to use my own standoffs. It's funny, theirs is actually a little bit larger diameter. Instead of 5mm, it's like 5.2 or something. And all my other stuff is, yeah, besides, you know what, I just like the color ones better. I like the red or blue or what have you. So I'm going to use my own standoffs. For now, I'm going to use Armaton's steel screws. But honestly, I prefer aluminum screws like this one. Not just for looks, but it does save weight. A decent amount of weight, actually, like 12 grams. And you may, oh, 12 grams, but 12 grams is half a motor. I always like to think of weight in relative terms. So if you use a 25-gram motor, 12 grams is almost half a motor that you might be carrying around extra. You'll pay for it. Aluminum screws aren't cheap, but they are lighter. And in the final assembly, always use Loctite, because I've had the screws back out. So for aluminum going into aluminum, you want to use Loctite. Okay, let's get out our tools to assemble. Okay, here's the parts. So off to the side, out of camera shot, I've got 7mm screws, and then here I've got 8mm. Armaton's only has 7mm screws. I like to use 6mm aluminum screws for the side of the frame. But where the screws have to go into these side plates, I use 8mm because it has to go through not just 1.5mm of carbon, it has to go through 3.5 because these are 2mm. So because it has to go through more carbon, I like to use a slightly longer screw for what's holding the arms together, and all the stress is gonna be where the arms are being held anyway. So that's another reason. So here's the standoffs, and I will start assembling. So the first things first, arm. And so the test assemble, obviously, you know, you normally just build it right away, but I'm doing this because these are still somewhat in the prototype stage. I want to make sure that everything fits, and then also as part of this video, just as a reference on how to assemble. So I've got the frame, and then on the outside I'm going to put the retaining, what I call the side plate, the retaining plate. Oh, this must be for the rear arm, see? Like I said, the front and rear arms got slightly different thicknesses. There we go. That's snug, as it should be. Okay, so that's pretty good. That'll mostly stay. And actually what I should have done was I should have started this off. Okay, so 8mm screw. Into this, and this is the hole for ESC pass through. This hole will fit a 30 amp little B ESC, and then some. So I left a little bit of room for that. So I imagine a 24 amp KISS would fit just fine as well, because you have to wire up the PDB and the ESCs and then slide it all through the hole as you assemble the frame. So okay, we'll just put that there. Alright, those two holes, and then let's put the battery strap plate and the flight controller and PDB plate. I'm going to hold that with my finger, with my thumb, so that it stays as level as I can have it. And I'm going to assemble the other side. Oh, nice snug fit. Now I'm going to do this off camera just so I can see it better in my lap, but I have to line up the tabs in the two center plates with the holes on the other side plate. That's pretty good, just like that. So I got the front arm, the two center plates, and one side plate. Now I'm going to slide on the other arm plate. Is that the right one? Yep. That is snug. That's good. Put in that 8mm screw. Just get it started. Basically, I just don't want the frame to fall apart at this point. Another 8mm screw. Alright, so yeah, when you only have one, if you're doing a test assemble of the frame, install that one right here on one side, and that way when you put the two sides together, screwing in the other side will keep it. See, now the center frames aren't falling apart. So okay, actually we're going to eventually replace this one with this, so we'll leave that in there for now. It's easy enough to take out and change later. Okay, so now we have those, and all that's needed really is the rear arms. So to do the rear arms, we're going to put these side ones first at the right angle. If you reverse this, you're pointing the wrong way, so you want to make sure you know, it's going to be here. You want to make sure the ESC holes line up and everything. So put that there. This one, and we'll just leave that somewhat loose, and then this slides right into the back, and again it has to slide in. Think about it. And then those side plates will be snug, so they will sit right there. Okay, so let's go ahead, and these are going to be the 8mm screws. I am going to use tweezers, just easier. Okay, so everything's still pretty loose because I haven't tightened everything up yet. Now there are standoffs that you place at varying holes. I like to use this one back here in the middle. And there should be one right around here. Right above the shark's eye. Okay, 4 of the 6 or 7mm screws. We'll put the GoPro plate. Okay, and now we're going to go ahead and remove the one we already put in. We have in very loosely anyway. And you could put a standoff right here. I did put holes there as a protection instead of a 3D printed bumper, but I like this bumper, it's great. Okay, so yeah, everything's loose. It's still pretty good, even though I haven't tightened everything down. It's pretty snug, but I'm going to tighten most of the screws down. I don't want to bring it all the way, so there's probably going to be like a 1mm gap from carbon to the end of the standoff, which is okay because that means that it's snug. Oh, and the thing about this frame is, like I said, the arms are being held in by compression. So if you crash a few times and you find the frame getting loose, the arms rattle or whatever, take out the standoff that's above and below the arm, file down 1/2 millimeter. And if you have to go 1mm, go ahead, but I bet you only need 1/2 millimeter. Put them back, and that'll squeeze the arms even tighter. So that's the thing about a frame held by compression. You have to compress it, and sometimes if things loosen up, you just have to recompress it by adding a little bit of a gap that can be compressed. Basically, I'm holding 3 fingers on the screw. When I tighten it and my 3 fingers stop, I figure that's like a good torque wrench right there. I'm doing this in kind of a half-assed order, but normally I start from the center of the frame and work my way out. And if you really want to do it right, you should be pressing down on it so that it screws together square. Alright, there we go. Solid. So I'm trying to pivot the arms like this, and I can't. I'm sure you could do it to the point where it's almost breaking, but so far so good. And there we go. Assemble frame. So you may see a 1/2 millimeter gap. That's perfect. If there's no gap, that means it's all sitting right on the carbon, and that's not perfect because the gap means that you are compressing it. So that means that this isn't resting completely against this carbon piece, which is resting completely against the tab on the arm. If that's the case, then it's a little too. That gap means that there is some compression going on. And same with the front. If you see like a 1/2 millimeter or 1/4 millimeter gap, that's really okay. If it bothers you, you can, you know, file away the gap on the arm so that everything comes together. But then be careful, because if it's all touching nice and neatly, that means the compression may be not much or just right, or maybe after a crash or two it may become loose. So a little bit of gap in the carbon plate is okay, in my opinion. Okay.